distinguished delegates and fellow speakers, Mr. Vice President, thank you for the opportunity. I want to speak plainly from a country's perspective, drawing on what we're seeing in South Africa and building on our new cooperation framework, which is aligned to the National Development Plan and the Midterm Development Plan. But most importantly, it's also aligned to national budgeting processes and financing mechanisms. This is happening because we're advancing structured engagement with several government departments, including the department in charge of planning, monitoring, and evaluation, the National Treasury, of course, the Department of International Relations and Cooperation, and other sector departments, with the intention of linking policy priorities with financing strategies, budget processes, and emerging investment pipelines. We've heard about the importance of ensuring that the path to investment with coordination is really important. And that's where the resident coordination system matters, and leadership as well from the UN Development Group. Financing and partnerships are where fragmentation is most costly. And in the South African context, the reality we're facing is one which is not dissimilar to other upper middle income countries, where we have strong domestic financing institutions and capital markets, but also persistent inequality, unemployment, and fiscal constraints, including debt pressures that continue to constrain development spending. So it is important that coordination helps bridge the gap and connect the dots, because without this, capacity building, as well as policy and technical assistance and institutional strengthening, becomes a set of disconnected interventions and conversations. And the resident coordinator function helps bring these together, aligning the full UN system and partners behind national priorities and supporting more effective use of resources. And we clearly see in our context that partners from the private sector, but also the IFIs and development partners are increasingly ready to play their part. We are already undertaking and experiencing this alignment more concretely, including through closer work with the World Bank, the International Monetary Fund, the African Development Bank, and other IFIs, especially around the Just Energy Transition Implementation Framework, where over $13 billion have been pledged, and also efforts around improving governance and the capacity of the state to deliver, a key pillar of the midterm development plan of the 7th administration. So concretely, we're doing three things. First, through the South African Business Initiative for Impact, which was launched on the margins of the G20 presidency last year, the UN is working with partners to actively convene asset owners, private sector leaders, and development partners to move from interest to investable pipelines aligned with national priorities. We are seeking to make development investable rather than trying to make investment developmental. South Africa's own unprecedented investment conferences are showing sustained appetite from investors. At the recent 6th South African Investment Conference, convened by the President, companies made a record $54 billion commitment out of the target of $185 billion by 2030. And we are encouraging the government and other partners to pursue this going forward. I already mentioned our engagement with line departments, but also with the presidency on integrated national financing frameworks, and USG Lee mentioned this. And this is in line with the FFD outcome, because it is important that a blended approach to financing and a healthy package of financing is what we can advance. Lastly, we are also taking a more deliberate territorial approach to localization, because that's where the rubber hits the road. And we're working with government institutions, but also the South African Local Government Association and the Development Bank of Southern Africa, as well as the Joint SDG Front, Old Mutual and African Bank, on township entrepreneurship, but also looking at aligning national priorities with subnational planning, financing, and delivery. And we can only do this if we're working effectively across the United Nations country team, delivering better together. And we see this in our interventions around One Health and pandemic preparedness, in restoring landscapes in Southern Africa, an initiative we're rolling out with UNEP and UNESCO, but also in addressing GBV in schools and better outcome for girls, financed by the European Union and other investors, but delivered through UNICEF, UNESCO, UNFPA, UN Women, UNDP, and others. So ultimately, financing is about the national choices that I have made and the UN coordinated backing that we're advancing. And only in this way will we be able to address the development emergency that the Secretary General yesterday indicated. So let me end with my straightforward ask. The ask I have is really around ensuring that there's predictable and flexible funding, pooled and core, that enables the United Nations to effectively play its part. And we heard this morning about the funding compact commitments. Secondly, we also need to ensure that we are supporting country-led financing frameworks, which aligns public, private, and international resources. And third, we need to ensure that there is also alignment between national policy and budget choices, particularly those that seek investments in people, jobs, and resilience. And this is relevant in the South African context, because where we see policy, partnerships, and financing aligned, progress becomes tangible, and the resident coordinator system is central in playing this role. I thank you.